upside down and inside out. What kind of a mixed-up world is this? Stuff and nonsense, you might proclaim, for even the characters declare we are all mad here. It's not once upon a time in the normal way of understanding, and not really like a dream, even though that's supposed to be what it is. So what is it then, this famous Victorian-inspired Wonderland that still somehow manages to fascinate us? It's been portrayed in numerous ways, all of which shed light. My own fantasy adaptation would be to portray it as a retelling by a client in a psychotherapy session called Alice on the Couch, or some such name. For in following the rabbit and falling down the hole, our heroine is most certainly brought into direct contact with her unconscious. Inspired by the Romantics, and most certainly an inspirer of later surrealists, writing in ways and about issues that Freud and the entire psychoanalytic movement would later bring its collective focus to bear upon, Alice's adventures were groundbreakingly mesmerizing. Those who populate her tale are closely related to those characters who surround Alice in her everyday life, though writ large and exposed in ways normally hidden. And yet children do have a way, don't they, of looking straight through an adult's carefully managed persona to a more stripped down, undisguised version. Alice has Carol's eyes, of course, and all that this brings into the mix. Yet we will take Alice as we find her for the purposes of our investigations and see what is to be seen. One thing is clear. Wonderland is very different from the world up top. And as Alice proceeds through the pages of her story, she undergoes experiences that will be utterly life-changing, albeit a little discombobulating. "I knew who I was when I woke up this morning," she declares at one point, when asked who she is by the caterpillar. "But I think I must have changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice. "But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will some day, you know, and then after that into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel it a little queer, won't you?" I have a dear friend, herself a therapist, who says everybody needs a good breakdown, sometime or other, a deep journey of discovery, an adventure, if you like, much like many of those we've personally experienced over the years. We've all tumbled down the rabbit hole from time to time and struggled to make sense of our new predicaments. In the end, says my friend, such experiences make us fit to be let out. Fit to be let out in the sense of having grown up, somehow, through experience, often bitter and painful, always disorienting. Somehow we achieve a new maturity, a psychological and emotional maturity, which makes us more responsible human beings in the fullest sense. Bruno Bettelheim famously wrote of fairy stories in his celebrated book, The Uses of Enchantment, The Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales, that each fairy tale is a magic mirror which reflects some aspects of our inner world and of the steps required by our evolution from immaturity to maturity. For those who immerse themselves in what the fairy tale has to communicate, it becomes a deep, quiet pool, which at first seems to reflect only our own image, but behind it we soon discover the inner turmoils of our souls, its depth, and ways to gain peace within ourselves and with the world, which is the reward of our struggles. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It involves, in summary of course, the integration of unconscious content into the conscious personality, resulting in a movement to what Jung called the self. It's a process, wrote Jung, only experienced by those who have gone through the wearisome but indispensable business of coming to terms with the unconscious components of the personality. And the very best way we can discover and begin this lifelong process is to take heed of this material as it comes into our lives through dreams, through imagination, and through pondering the symbols of myth and fairy tale. These symbols stem from the psyche, wrote Joseph Campbell. They speak from and to the spirit, and are in fact the vehicles of communication between the deeper depths of our spiritual life and this relatively thin layer of consciousness by which we govern our daylight existences. And, as Alice discovers from the get-go, the unconscious is not merely the repository for all that which is repressed and shameful and dark and wounded, although this material is surely to be found, but also, as Jung maintained, the beautiful, soulful, unrealized potentials inherent in us all, that if coaxed into the light and integrated, can result in significant transformation. By the end of her adventure, Alice will discover much to aid her on her way. Her curiosity will lead her to ask many questions and to come to terms with not knowing or of getting ridiculous answers that make no sense. There will be times when it will be all far too much, and she will stamp her feet and cry and end up in a great pool of her own tears, as well we might. "I wish I hadn't cried so much," says Alice, as she swam about. "I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears." The Mad Hatter will infuriate her, but then the Cheshire Cat will make her smile, as bizarre and absurd as it is. And she will rally her spirits, pick herself up, and carry on. And bit by bit, she will change from a little girl lost to a plucky young woman with a great capacity for uncertainty and transformation. After all, she has survived much, changing size several times over, putting up with endless absurdities, and even nursing a rather odd-looking baby that kept morphing into a pig and back again. She will make friends and allies along the way, discover how to do 6 impossible things before breakfast, and even take on the indomitable Red Queen. She will dare to stand up and be counted, to challenge the ruthless off-with-their-heads policy, which has the entire court quivering with fear. She will force this mad queen to treat her with a modicum of courtesy, before finally realising it's all just a figment of her imagination. "You're nothing but a pack of cards," she boldly asserts. And in saying so, the spell is instantly broken. She has achieved lucidity, her full height, as Carroll puts it, a freedom of sorts, and as such she is fit to be let out, to begin her adult life. The entire pack then rose up into the air, Carroll concludes, and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank, with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the tree upon her face. "Wake up, Alice dear," said her sister. "Why, what a long sleep you've had." We can learn much from Alice and her odd adventures, if only the simple understanding that in getting turned upside down and inside out and back to front, in falling through our own particular rabbit holes, whatever they might be, we will, God willing, all come out stronger and taller in the end.